So thanks everybody for sticking around to the end of the day. It's been a fantastic event. I think I'm sure you'll agree. We've already had a really great host of speakers up here through the day. Real experts in their field, and some fascinating advice that we've all taken away from the day, I'm sure. To round off the day today, we're going to be hosting a short sort of Q&A panel where we'll be discussing how SMEs can develop a holistic digital marketing strategy. And on the panel today, we have John Norris, who was on a couple of people ago, I think, from Rocket Mill, in the centre there, obviously. Got Komal, who was up a second ago and is sticking around for the final push. And Kerry Watkins from Social Brighton, who was also on the stage a little earlier on today. So to start off, I think really what we need to look at is really what holistic strategy means, and which are the most important channels to consider when setting up your strategy. Who'd like to kick off with that?
I won't just say email. So, in my opinion, holistic is really looking at your overall business objectives and being able then to apply that to your marketing objectives, which then filter down into the other channels. So how do those different channels play in and mix to deliver on to those overall marketing objectives? And then you've got the strategy for each of the channels and the tactical ways of looking at the different channels as well. So a holistic view is what is it that the business needs to achieve, and then applying that to marketing, in my opinion.
I would more or less agree with you, but I would say you can kind of build into that working in quite an agile way. You shouldn't try to set out a strategy at the beginning and say, these are the channels I'm going to use, and then you stick to them and you don't get the results you want, and then you're left kind of clinging to these channels as your ship sinks. You need to kind of test things. If you're not seeing the return that you need to see, maybe that channel isn't the right approach for your business, so you can sort of chop it off and maybe try something new.
I was basically going to add what you just said, so I don't really have any extra things to say on that one.
Okay, so what guys would you consider to be the major points that SMEs struggle with when it comes to digital marketing?
Yeah, I think it's just the fact that there's so much of it. I mean, people like us, we spend our entire careers learning about it, and it is actually quite a large part of the job is staying up to date with what's happening in it. So, Google changed this, and Facebook's new rules say that, and all the rest of it. So it's actually really, really difficult to stay on top of digital marketing best practice, especially if you're a small business owner that also has a business to run. I mean, we struggle with it, and it's our jobs. Sure. I think that's definitely the most difficult part for me.
The feedback I have from small businesses is that they get quite frustrated that there aren't any quick wins. And I think one of the hardest things is about understanding you have to put a lot of time and effort in, especially with social media. I'm sure the other guys would agree, about to build up your data and your networks so that you can then have it's a long-term impact.
I think actually the biggest challenge for a small business marketer is time. I think that with the huge, so playing into what everybody else said, so actually there is a huge mix, and you've got so many things to do and achieve. And each of those channels has very specific intricacies that understanding what those are to be able to get those quick wins, because there are, but you've got to really understand each of the channels to be able to play in to those little tactical things that will give you the quick wins. Not only that, I think that with digital marketing, we find that a lot of marketers find it really hard to make the business case to board. So digital marketing it needs to prove an ROI. Lots of boards don't really understand the value. They want to see the value straight away. And then that also plays back into objective setting. And I think that a lot of brands and marketers don't set out their stall in terms of what do we want to achieve and how does that achieve the business goals. And I think if you can do that and you can prove that each and every time you report back to the board, that then brings your case to those different channels and the different elements as well.
Okay, and so to add to that, I mean, what would you say might be the other areas that businesses in general consider themselves to be effective in and doing well, executing effectively, but actually are falling short?
I'm obviously going to say social media here, because a lot of businesses, I think, they're doing stuff on social media, so they think, oh, we're doing quite well, we've got a Twitter and a Facebook, but actually there's probably at least an extra 50% of work that they could do that would really help the business, and it comes back to having objectives in the first place and having a proper strategy.
I think it's potentially around identifying those quick wins. But again, that comes back to domain knowledge and how sort of ensconced in the digital marketing world you are. So it may... so, we have a lot of clients who launch new websites and they're really proud of them and they kind of make a big song and dance about the website, but then actually they might have missed something really fundamental, and it's something that can be fixed quite easily, and then it's something that can have quite a big impact. So I suppose it's looking at the whole picture and identifying where those tiny changes that can make a big impact are.
Yeah, and I think don't just do because you feel that you have to. Don't just create a Facebook page because you feel you have to. Don't create a Twitter account because you feel you have to. Don't send a newsletter because you've got a database and that you feel that you have to. It's being really specific and understanding what works best for your brand. And that is about testing, about looking at the different elements. But again, the marketer's problem is time. It's really being able to do that. And there are lots of intricacies for every channel.
Because of that lack of time and because of the different and varying platforms that are available to digital marketeers, lots of companies are employing lots of platforms and different solutions to their digital marketing strategy. Is there a way, is it possible even to tie everything into one joint approach?
Really good question. If anyone understands the marketing landscape and knows Scott Brinker, I would recommend you take a look at his marketing landscape. 3 or 5 years ago, he looked at the marketing technology landscape, and there were 150 technology providers in that landscape. Now there are 4,000 a few years later, and there are new pockets emerging. Every few weeks, there's a new pocket of technology that's arising. So it's really complicated for the marketer to understand what are the best tools to use, what tools should we be using and focusing on, and what channels. And I think that I've worked with marketers for the last 20 years, and I've worked with really huge brands that still send batch and blast emails. Why do they do that? When they really truly understand the strategy, they really truly understand that they need the best piece of technology, but they're not using it. And I think that we created, to answer that challenge, we actually created the maturity model, which I talked to earlier, which really helps our clients take that journey in bite-sized chunks, so really understand what the next step is. And I think if that could be rolled out through the industry, and I think it is, I think quite a few big companies in the space are actually rolling out a similar, there's consultancies, there's ways in which to help and enable the marketer, but the marketer on its own, on their own, is floundering, I think, in a space that's really, really big.
Good answer. I think you have to think about what constitutes doing it well on a business by business basis, because what is effective digital marketing for a Fortune 500 company looks very different to what is effective digital marketing for a freelancer. And again, it goes back to choosing those right channels for you and testing them and making sure that they work. It may be that you only need like one. You know, you might be a local shop, and all you need to do is run some AdWords on local search. And that brings you all the business that you need. So you don't need a blog, and you don't need social media, and all that other stuff. So I think it's you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. It's very difficult to objectively look at a business from the outside and say, you are doing digital marketing well or you are doing digital marketing badly, because you don't know what's going on inside that business, and it could actually be meeting all of their needs.
And just to add to that, I would say that the channels that you're using at the moment, just recommend recording data from those. So as John said earlier, you start to learn which ones work and where it's best to focus your time, because we don't have a lot of time because we're all busy running a business.
Okay, so, and of course this question will also vary largely depending on the business or the operation that it's directed to. But if you had to pick a single channel or platform, what would be the most important if you were to be managing your strategy in-house?
You'd expect me to say social media, but actually most of my work comes through my website. So social media, my objective with social media is not to generate new business, but that's what my website does for me. So there isn't really an answer that fits for everybody, but for me it would just be about my website and SEO.
I think it's to do with how, so a lot of the time when clients come to us, they say we need to have this much in new business and we need it by here. And you know, some digital marketing practices like social, like content marketing, they take a long time to get going. So if you need 50 leads through the door tomorrow, probably paid search is the way to go, or email. So again, it depends on your objectives. It depends how quickly you need to get things up and running.
So it's not a channel. I'd say data. I'd say that actually key to every business is your data. So if you have people coming through your website, you have people making first-time purchases, if you can't then retarget those people, if you can't then communicate back to those people, you're then having to go out to the market and bring in new customers every time. And it costs so much more to bring in a new customer. So I would say the data, the customers that you've got and the prospects that you've got, and however you use that, that's up to you and what works well for your business. But I think data is absolutely key.
Okay, perfect. So that concludes the questions really we've got here, but I would like to open up any questions for people in the crowd. I'm sure there are many, considering the breadth of content we've gone through today. So does anybody have anything they'd like to ask the panel?
So you just talked about what you think is the best platform for selling and marketing your business, and I believe that the best platform is face-to-face. Obviously that's not a digital platform, but how do you see, especially for a small business that is just learning how to establish itself digitally, how do they start replicating their face-to-face sales technique online?
So I touched on this a little bit earlier, and I think a really good starting point is to think exactly what you said, which is to think about how you deal with people face-to-face, and particularly with social media that works well, because you can create the same character and speak as naturally and be very authentic. And I think that works with other channels as well, and that you take a very personal approach.
Yeah, and I think that ties really nicely into branding as well. You know, I think people think of it as the domain of larger businesses, but actually consistency in your brand can be just as important to a one-person business. So it's, you know, if somebody sees sees your stand over there and they see a logo in a certain color scheme, maybe that's your old brand and you've recently updated your website, and then they go through to their website and they're going to go, oh, this isn't the right company, and then maybe they'll go somewhere else. So I think it is that thing of tying everything together into kind of a consistent whole.
I think that the next best alternative to face-to-face is one-to-one marketing. And I think that every channel, if you can apply the strategies and the tactics, they will allow you to perform that one-to-one marketing. So whether it's having the right conversations on social, to targeting your SEO ads, to specific audiences, to email, allowing you to have a one-to-one conversation with specific segments. I think that that is the holy grail for every marketer, is to replicate that shopkeeper. Come in every weekend, the shopkeeper knows who you are, they understand, what you buy, they may have a new product that might be of interest to you. And that's really how we can try and aim to replicate that online.
You mentioned that you think that email templates are a little bit restrictive. What's the best email software to use? And is there any that are unbranded?
I'm going to say Pure 360, but there are loads of email technologies. It depends what kind of business you are and the size of your business, but starting at the MailChimp, and MailChimp have a really great drag and drop editor that allows you to build in a modular format, so panels and modular, that will allow you to do that. And then as you move up and you move in your sort of scale, so Pure 360 then is a step up from that and hits that sort of mid-market as you've grown, and then you have the big technology people like Adobe Campaign, who then target the big global businesses. So it really does depend on who you are, what you're looking to do. Pretty much all the technologies do a very similar thing and have the same features and functionalities. It's about how you use it. But I would recommend start off at MailChimp, and then as you grow your business, then start looking above and beyond that.
I'm not sure whether you'll be able to answer this, but it's to do with the mystery of Google searches and really about SEO, I suppose. And if one's trying to adjust the content on a home page, say, to improve your Google ranking, how long would it take for that to be reflected in the search? And how long and how much should you worry if you suddenly drop down the ranking? And can you then go back to where you were before in terms of the content and restore your ranking?
I'm wishing at this point that I had Chris, who I work with here, because he's an absolute genius at these sorts of things. But I think I'm right in saying the frequency at which a page is crawled is to do with how deep within the website it is. So if it's your home page, it will be crawled quite regularly. If it's 5 folders deep, it won't be crawled as regularly. If you change the content on the website and you find your rankings tank, again, it depends how important that page is to your website in terms of the impact. If it's the home page and it's where most of your traffic comes from in terms of organic search, and it suddenly drops off a cliff, obviously that's going to be concerning. What you can often find is traffic drops aren't necessarily a bad thing, because you may find one of the things we do quite a lot of work with clients on is investigating how to speak their customers' language, because they might think that they're selling some floaty corporate term, but what their customers are actually looking for is something else entirely. So they've built a page based on what they think people are looking for, but it's actually not what they're looking for. So we'll refocus those pages around what people are searching for. The search volume might be much lower, so suddenly they see traffic drop off a cliff, so they get quite worried. But actually, the traffic that's coming through to that page is much more relevant and much more like their target audience. So it's again, on a case-by-case basis, it's not always the end of the world. And as far as I'm aware, if you see your rankings drop, if you basically revert the content to what it was before, you should see it kind of bounce back up to where it was, I think. Can I just add confidence to that? Sure. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Just to say that you can actually ask Google to recrawl your website as well through the Google Search Console. So if you want things to happen sooner, if you want to wait for Google to recrawl, you can submit your sitemap or individual pages as well.
Well, thanks very much for sticking around for the end of the day. I know Simon's going to wrap up in a moment, so I'll thank you very much. Thank the panellists again for joining us for the second time this afternoon, and wish you all a safe journey home.